This past week's portion of the Bible, read in every synagogue, was Chaye Sara, the life of Sarah. Okay. It starts off, and the life of Sarah was, or the lives of Sarah were, 100 years and 20 years and 7 years, the years of the lives of Sarah. Rashi points out that putting the term years in, dividing the 100 years and the 20 years and the 7 years by the word year indicates a special message here, that she was at 100 like she was at 20, and like 20 as she was at 7. The problem with Rashi is, if you look in Genesis and so forth, there's lots of places where a compound number of tens and ones is expressed by years and years. So it can't be just that. I would say it's the expression itself. These are the lives of Sarah. Okay. What does this portion tell us about Sarah's life? Anybody? What? That she died. Just picture this. This is the life of Abraham Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth assassinated him in 1865. End of the story. It would be a very funny way to tell someone's life. So I would say that itself prompts Rashi to look in the verse for some kind of subtle hint of the nature of Sarah's life, since the Torah says nothing whatsoever about Sarah's life here. These are the lives of Sarah. She lived 127 years, and she died. And she died in Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron. So obviously, cryptically, in this verse is written the nature of Sarah's life. That somehow 100 years and 20 years and 7 years are not merely numbers of the amount of years she lived, but descriptions of the nature of her life. Rashi quotes the Medrash, which says, as I recall, that it's to compare these periods. That in 100 years, she was as righteous as one 20 years old, and in 20 years, she was as beautiful as one 7 years old. There's another version of it, if you look in the various sources, that 100 years she was as beautiful as one 20 years old, and in 20 years she was as righteous as one 7 years old. Anyway, whichever version you have, the notion is that she had two outstanding traits: physical beauty, certain charm and appeal, and extreme righteousness. She was without sin, to use the exact words of Rashi. The physical beauty part is obvious from the Torah itself. When she was 65 years old and they went down to Egypt, the Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, tried to take Sarah to be his wife. Now, I guarantee you, the emperor of Egypt, the Pharaoh, could have had any 17 or 18-year-old he wanted. Indeed, as we see, when King David was old in the Haftorah, they brought him a young girl, Abishag Hashunami. He would not normally take a woman 65 years old. If, in fact, Pharaoh took Sarah at the age of 65, that itself would indicate this trait. And as Abraham says, now I know that you are truly beautiful. And therefore we have to be worried that they'll kill me in order to take you, because there's no God awareness, no fear of God in this place. So this outward physical beauty is somehow coupled with a quality of being without sin. I would postulate there's a connection between the two, because usually, not always, usually it's the rather homely girl who is the good girl. Really. Or the rather untalented or unhandsome man. Why? Because if you don't have physical beauty, you have to have something. So it's really the person who's born with beauty. As I taught in the Talmud class this past Wednesday, we're dealing with the subject of conception now, and the traits God puts into the person from the moment of conception. So whatever trait a person has, he can either be great or evil with that trait. Each trait, each condition in life has its temptation, has its way of using it for bad and way of using it for good. A person who's physically beautiful has the temptation of getting by on that beauty, very simply. the dumb blonde syndrome in the movies and so forth. That the person who, if she can appeal to people so much on the basis of beauty or charm, she does not have to be intelligent or righteous or anything else. So Sarah, who was apparently the most beautiful woman in the world, Miss Universe, or Mrs. Universe, 4,000 years ago, that same Sarah was also the most saintly and righteous woman of her age. And that itself, in my opinion, shows her greatness, these two traits that Rashi mentioned. Why 100 is said to be without sin is 20. Why is 20 an age without sin? That's one problem. Okay? And 7, the age of beauty. At 20, she was as beautiful as 7. I always believe, especially in Jerusalem, that God makes happen to a person whatever should happen. Since I'm dealing with this subject, I would assume, I had guard duty at my son's school this week. Very nice religious school with boys and girls without ladies. And the thing that struck me, I wasn't thinking of the portion at that time of the week, is the little girls were so charming. The song of Marie Chevalier was, thank heaven for little girls. So little girls 7 and 8 years old were running around the school, leaving their briefcases by me. And somehow I was really attracted to the beauty of their personalities, their appearance at that age. And I was thinking to myself, that's about the most beautiful age of a woman, 7 or 8 years old. So this Rashi, our version of the Medrash, would seem to confirm that. At 20, the real beauty, the real feminine charm, if you go to the Miss Universe contest or something like that, they would tell you the real charm and beauty is around the age 20. No. Rashi says 20, she was even as beautiful as she was at 7. At 7 is the age of real charm. And ask any daddy with a 7-year-old, and ask any mommy with a 7-year-old if she doesn't feel competition from the 7-year-old. Just as an informal survey of the persons in the room of the female persuasion, how many sensed something like that when they were about 7 years old, that they had an extraordinary charm in the field? Any? Really? Last night's class was large percentage did. You remember this. This is the more bashful class, right? Anyway, yeah. You did?
The idea of being right at her age, you imply that it's only in her age?
I'm sorry?
Compared to all the women that were running around in her age, she wouldn't have to be so righteous.
No, it says at 100 she was as righteous as 20, which means she kept.
No, but you said in her age, I don't measure her time.
Yes, in her.
Like Noah.
Oh no, I'm not, no intention of that. The Torah only speaks of her time, and she was the most righteous and the most beautiful woman in that age. Maybe another age she also would have been, but she didn't live in another age, so I can't tell you. Anyway, what we can learn from this is that a usual condition doesn't have to be such. Beauty doesn't have to be a means to produce a relatively shallow person. So the person can be very deep and very saintly despite having great beauty. That's certainly a lesson here. And the other lesson is that subjects such as feminine appeal and beauty are far more subtle than Western culture has them. That the 7-year-old, and many psychoanalytic writings would certainly confirm this, that the traits of true charm and beauty can occur in children, and these realms of attraction between the sexes and so forth exist even at a very young age, even though they're not physically expressible at such ages. Okay. Now, the notion of being without sin at 20 seems to contradict what notion in Judaism? Rashi says she was as much without sin at 100 as at 20. When is a person considered basically without sin in Judaism? Before 13 or 12. 12 for a girl is considered maturity. When she's bat mitzvah, she's a person who's in the realm of mitzvot. And 13 for a boy to be in the realm of mitzvot. Rashi says she was as much without sin at 100 as at 20. Why is there a presumption of being without sin at 20? Yeah.
Because that's when you become karmiya.
Punishments from heaven. There's a tradition that God does not punish people until the age of 20. So we have here two traditions which offhand would seem somewhat contradictory. That a person becomes bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah 12 or 13, which say you're responsible and you have to keep the mitzvahs and so forth. And another tradition that God directly does not punish anyone until they reach the age of 20. Tomorrow. So I would suggest here that we have a concept similar to the concept I gave last week. The things don't just spring up at once. It's obvious to anyone who's ever attended a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah that this person has not changed in the one day so much. Some of them are more mature, some are less mature. While a 12 or 13-year-old is not a man or a woman. We empirically sense that. So I think the idea is that you become a bar or bat mitzvah in that your acts are meaningful. You've reached a level of maturity where when you do an act, it can have intention, it can have meaning, and you can fulfill the duty of an adult person of any age because your act has meaning and purpose. At the same time, in a sense, you're not really able to control yourself. You're not growing up enough that you can have complete mastery and control over yourself. Of course, one never is, but there's levels of it. And 20 appears to be the level that Chazal thought is where the person could really be held responsible. There's one thing to say his act is meaningful, and a second that God would really hold him responsible. Yeah?
I think you mentioned Rashi about 70-year-olds for beauty. I think he's equating the brother of innocence and beauty. So we've seen the Talmud with 3 other beautiful women which are really grown, the Talmud Sutta. So they're becoming very beautiful.
Rashi here does not mean innocence because he said belief chet. She was without sin, which is innocence, at 20 and 100. But the 20 to 7 equation in this version is for beauty. And that's the theme I want to develop. The 7-year-old, somehow the Rashi's notion, or the medrash he took it from, is that the peak of feminine charm and beauty is about the age of 7. And, but there's another version which says that, and maybe to go in for a minute to the other version, that at 100 she was like 20 for beauty, which would fit the stories that even at 65 she was very beautiful, and Pharaoh wanted to take her, and later with Avimelech. And at 20 she was as innocent as 7, which of course is easier to understand. The 7-year-old can't be held to be a sinner in any meaningful sense. So even this issue is not 100% clear. You find it discussed in a most unusual source in the book dealing with halachic responses to the Holocaust. Okay. All problems that arose during the Holocaust of a religious nature, there were questions as to whether Kaddish should be said, whether memorial prayer should be said over little children who the Germans killed. Because the Kaddish has all kinds of mystical meanings of raising the soul's level in heaven and so forth and so on. And the question is, if these little children are beyond the concept of being off or sinning anyway, so is there any need or purpose for it? And if you look in that book, there's loads of discussions as to just what age responsibility and sin would begin to exist. And there are views that there are, at even very, very young age, there is a certain amount of free will and a certain amount of responsibility for what one does. But it would depend on the extent of it. And people can sense empirically, too. You sometimes will spank a 4 or 5-year-old. Psychoanalysts seem to think that before 4 years old, punishment is relatively meaningless, because a child does not sense it as related to his act so much as an expression of meanness or cruelty on the part of the one who punishes. Okay, so anyway, this is the version of Rashi. To go back to the problem, Sarah's life is only described as death. There's not a word really about her life except this statement of the years, and Rashi and the other Midrashim tried to draw out from this statement of years a very concise description of her life. We have another description of her life in one letter, described in the Fashos Asher Asu B'Charan. When Abraham and Sarah, at that time Avram and Sarai, came to live in Israel, God's first commandment to them, make Aliyah. I can't speak to you here, it's not the setting, if you remember from Lech Lecha. We have to go to the right place to have our honeymoon. So, at that point, it says they took with them the souls whom they made in Haran. And it says they made. Not the souls Asher Asu B'Charan, which Abraham made, Abraham brought to God, but which they made. And from that one change of letter, from Hey to Vav, we see that Sarah was also actively involved in educating people and raising their spirits and so forth. Not just Abraham. But it's all with hints like this. We have her open disputes with Hagar and Ishmael. We have her being taken by the kings and almost undergoing rape and so forth. But those don't really show her character so much. It's just things that happen to her. except that there too we're told, again cryptically, Abraham is told, even though it seems wrong for you to send away Yishmael, that he's a bad influence on Yitzchak, listen to Sarah. Your wife knows the way of God better than you, that she is greater than you, at least in this realm in prophecy. So from these hints, we get pictures of Sarah as a great prophetess, as a great moral figure, despite being born so beautiful that the natural and easy way of life for her would be to rely on her beauty and forget her brains and character. And she had opportunity to be the wife of the king of Egypt, the wife of Abimelech, and so forth. Instead, she chose to go with the missionary Abraham in his mission to change the world. So we get pictures, and very clear pictures of Sarah, but they're all cryptic. The Bible does not spell them out and talk about them at length. The reason I would suggest is this itself is Sarah's nature. The nature of Sarah, she is in the tent. That it's the nature of the ideal Jewish female personality that she is very, very modest. That she's a person who remains private, essentially. Abraham is more the public person, Sarah the private person. And the Torah, I would say, so to speak, respects her modesty, respects her privacy, and does not dwell on her at length. Now, what are the significant things? So we just have that she died, and Abraham goes about taking care of the arrangements for the funeral and so forth. What great things does Abraham do next? Anybody? What does Abraham do next? He buries her and so forth. Buys a plot of land. I'm sorry? Ensure he gets Yitzchak married off, right? To a good person. Is that a very great thing to do? Is it? What great thing does he do? He remarries whom? Keturah, whoever she is. And is that a great accomplishment? Yeah, what happens to those 6 sons? What comes out of them? Nothing. And the Arab people, but you know, it's nice, but the Torah just mentions their names. This one begat so and so and so forth, and that's it. What great thing did Abraham do afterwards? Yeah. All right, that's a nice thing. He didn't want to take a gift. He took a purchase. Yeah. That's before. Sarah died on hearing the news, according to some. That's how she died. Either from the Satan or Isaac. There's 2 versions of it. Yeah. Took care of his grandchildren. How do you know that? Who says he did? Doesn't give him gifts to keep them away from Isaac to make peace. So come on, what great thing did Abraham do after Sarah died? Right, it turned out to be an important thing, but didn't involve much effort on his part. Huh? He bought a cave, fine. He mourned for her. But what great thing did he do? Like, look, what we read about before. He left his land, he left his family, he left his whole culture to go after God to a place unknown. He spread the word of God all over the world. He got to the level of faith where he was ready to do something where he got no promises from God. If you remember, Abraham went through this growth. He started off doing things with Tovat Kol Hanafcha, the Lech Lecha of Rashi. That God promised him, I'll make you a great people, people will be blessed in you, you'll get all kinds of rewards. So he was great. He left everything to follow God. But it was for promises. Later he got to the higher level of Lech Lecha. The higher level, Lech Lecha, with Yitzchak to the Akedah, to the sacrifice of Isaac. At that level, what did God promise him? Nothing. That was great. He was ready to go against all logic and sense. The one son who was supposed to carry on God's mission, suddenly he has to sacrifice. He's ready to do it. With no promise from God, there Rashi doesn't say the same expression, Lech Lecha, to the place I tell you and so forth. Okay? So those were great things. Abraham converted people, he did all sorts of things. Had a son, a miracle in his old age. So what great things did he do after Sarah died? Nothing. Right. That's the answer, according to Reb Soloveitchik. I'm saying something Reb Soloveitchik said. Reb Soloveitchik says, this is the Torah's cryptic, silent testimony to the true greatness of Sarah. That Abraham, who is talked about so much, basically does nothing. Just makes final arrangements to hand things over to the next generation, burying Sarah properly, making sure Yitzchak is married off, and then he goes to live with Keturah, nice woman maybe, has some kids, but no significance in the eternal drama of the Jewish people, which is the story of the Bible. Just like the Bible doesn't bother to describe Abraham before he's 75 years old. It's a very interesting story. We have it in tradition. But the Bible doesn't say a word about him till he's 75. Because that's when he completes his personal development and enters into the mission of starting the people whose job it is to bring the world back to Gan Eden, to the Garden of Eden, which Adam had messed up. And universal mankind had messed up with Noah, the flood, and the Tower of Babel, the pleasure mad and the power mad cycle. Abraham's to break that pleasure mad and power mad cycle. And so the Torah, once he's finished, once Sarah dies, it relates to things that are necessary for the continuation of the people. He buries her. He gets a good wife for Yitzchak, and that's it. The rest of what he does doesn't seem to have much of any significance. So Reb Soloveitchik said, you see from this, that even if you're Abraham, the man who searched for God his whole life and God came to him, who started the people, who's the father of many nations, without him there'd be no Judaism, no Islam, no Christianity, no Messiah coming, nothing. Without Sarah, Abraham is not Abraham anymore. And that explains also the verse. It says, V'Avraham zaken ba bayamim, after this. Abraham, in this week's portion, was old ba bayamim. What's the problem with that verse? V'Avraham zaken. No, I'm sorry. Zaken ba is masculine or something. Yeah. Repetition. We know he's old already from way before, when he had his son, 100 years old. We know Abraham was an old man. So again, Reb Soloveitchik says the same message. Others say it too. Avraham Zaken Baba Yamim, he became really old after Sarah died. Not chronologically. Chronologically, he was old already. But in spirit, he felt old. He felt this was the end. Without Sarah, Abraham was nothing. And this again would be an indication of almost the ideal relationship between Abraham and Sarah, which is the coin with the old man and woman, Abraham and Sarah on one side and the young one on the other. There's a certain togetherness. In the case of the Baal Tshuva who marries the long-established Yerushalmi, or vice versa. This was a case of people who went through it together, had the same experience, stuck together, and so forth. It's a different sort of relationship. The later relationships of the Avot, according to Hersher, of Soloveitchik, and so forth, weren't as good, maybe, from our standard of, like a real, deep, pleasant relationship. When we have Rivka coming this week, the wife is found for Yitzchak, Rivka, and what happens when Rivka arrives? What does she do when she sees Yitzchak? Wait, first, what's the word in Hebrew? Batipol, mi'alagama. What's batipol? She fell off the camel. What else did she do when she saw Yitzchak? Huh? She covered her face. If I remember the Hebrew. She covered her face with the veil. Okay. Reb Soloveitchik posits that this is the picture of the marriage where there was not such good communication or understanding in a way. And still it was a great marriage. I'm sorry?
Evidence for that
in the Chazal, I don't know, but it's in Hersher Reb Soloveitchik. It's the simple pshat of the words, too. But the chas patzlut. I'll tell you how I'll use my own words more than Reb Soloveitchik because they're a little more graphic in this. Picture a scene in my favorite city, like Sodom and Gomorrah, Las Vegas. Okay? A Jewish man goes out to Las Vegas and opens a hotel. And he does a very, very good business. He has a daughter, and the daughter somehow, grandfather already came from Europe, but the grandfather was gone. The man went out and opened the hotel in Las Vegas. And he has a little daughter who somehow has a personality which is quite the opposite of Las Vegas. She senses there's a God in the world, that man is not just animal, not just sensual. Money is not so important. The main thing is the human soul and delicacy and refinement and love and kindness and so forth. He has this little girl, and everybody sort of likes her around the hotel, but the whole world she sees is not like her. Suddenly one day a Masholach comes from Brooklyn, and this is supposed to be the days before there were telephones or airplanes or anything like that. Comes on his camel through the desert up to the Vegas Inn. And little Rivka's standing there. And after all the preliminaries, she's so kind and she welcomes everybody. He says, you know what? I come from a place, I work for a man, great rabbi back in Brooklyn, who has a son, and that son has the same ideals we do. Yeah. That son also, his whole emphasis on life is God, and discovering the God within the human being, and developing the God within the human being, and learning and praying, and working hard, no gambling or anything like that. And little Rivka in Las Vegas says, gee, that sounds great, that's just what I want. And they ask her parents, oh, wait, you've never seen the man, but all right, what's she going to do? This is the only thing she's heard in her life which fits the life image and lifestyle which she's created for herself, living in a society diametrically opposed to that lifestyle, just as Abraham himself did. Abraham starts out with the Avodah Zaraniks, and Abraham winds up the leader of the Baal Teshuvos. So little Rivka has the same start. Fine. Elazar puts her on the camel, and they slowly wind their way back to Borough Park. And as they get near Borough Park, they're near a big open subway station, and suddenly he spots his master Yitzchak. Yitzchak is a Kollel boy with long black coat and payas, and he's standing there shuckling and davening and reading Tehillim. Now Rivka grew up in Las Vegas. Rivka's a pretty sharp, pretty worldly little girl, even though she's a saintly little girl. When Rivka sees this is her man, she falls off the camel and covers her face with a veil. The covering the face with the veil is a sign, a symbol of her life attitude that there will be a veil between she and her husband. She doesn't go back. It might have been pretty hard in those times too, but no, she doesn't go back because he is dedicated to this great mission. She and Yitzchak are going to build the people of Israel, eventually redeem the world from the mess it got itself into in the Garden of Eden. They'll develop a people which will come to the special place in the world which is holy, the land of Israel. And they'll develop here a model nation which will serve as a model for the whole world. If it doesn't work the first time, try again. They have to be sent out because this nation won't tolerate a bad experiment. A second time they're sent out. Third time they won't be sent out. And she's going to change the whole world. A mission like that, you don't worry so much if you have such perfect communication and outlook with your husband. On the contrary, the two different attitudes will merge. The Yerushalmi boy and the Bashuva girl will create a new world together. But there's a veil between them. And there's even a reaction perhaps of initial shock.
What's the simple meaning of covering the face?
I don't know if there is one, frankly. The covering the face, you could say, is modesty. They say like the Arab women with the veils, but that's difficult because she was with Elazar and other men.
Just sensed in his presence, she sensed that she needed an additional...
It's difficult, but it would be the opposite. When she sees the man who she's going to be so close to marry, she'd feel the country, like talking to him and being... She was with men anyway. Elazar was there. He brought 10 men with him. They brought back 10 camels with people and servants and all. I mean, if a woman kept her face covered, she would have kept her face covered. And it's not... I get the general impression, Yaakov's kissing Rachel and so forth, that it was not such a puritanical society by Lavan in Las Vegas. So it wasn't that she was used to this. You could say that when she got there, but when she saw him, could be, but it's a little difficult, I would say, to cover her face suddenly. And then you have to couple that with she fell off the camel. Because if it's just she got down from the camel, without the Torah telling you she got off from the camel, you would be able to figure out she got off the camel. That she did not stay on the camel her whole life. And the Torah would not care whether she stayed on the camel or got off the camel.
Shock. So this is actually a reaction to a shock.
All right. But the shock thing is there.
What shocked him?
You say his greatness.
Both.
All right. Reb Soloveitchik and Hirsch say she was shocked, and it makes sense as I'm explaining it. Because Yitzchak is the personification in Kabbalah, in all Jewish tradition. Isaac is the personification of the introvert type, the type which builds, as Reb Soloveitchik puts it, which builds great structures and does great things. It's not an active type. It's a very active type. It's not passive. But it builds them in its own mind and soul. Not so much by relating to other people and things, but by building great intellectual and spiritual structures within itself. Okay? That's Yitzchak. Abraham is the type who's always going everywhere. Abraham everywhere is putting up altars and calling on the name of God. Abraham runs about Shuva Yeshiva. Abraham's out the Kotel pulling in people for Shabbos and yeshivas. That's Abraham. Yitzchak, at the end of his life, does that a bit. But basically, Yitzchak sits in the yeshiva, he learns, he develops himself, develops his family. He becomes a farmer, as we learned. He sows. The first farmer in history is Yitzchak. Some say it's even already in the beginning here. that Yitzchak went out l'suach basodeh. L'suach we usually say is to converse, meaning that Yitzchak instituted the afternoon prayer just before evening. But the Rashbam and of the universe. Okay. Abraham mourning Sarah. Now, so what happens? The couple gets married, Yitzchak and Rivka, and they have children struggling, and so forth. What happens from this? They adopt two opposite viewpoints of how children should be raised. What should happen to Yaakov? Yaakov starts out like his father, Ish Tam, a simple person, Yoshev Ohare, a very simple, perhaps a bit non-worldly person, completely immersed in the Torah, who sits in the tent. Abraham is not described as sitting in the tent. Yaakov reaches, Yitzchak described basically as farming, and he has to run everything. His son Yaakov already gets the trick. I guess they're settled enough. They get the wells established and people aren't stuffing their wells anymore, and they can devote more time to the spirit, the third generation. So his son Yaakov is the yeshiva student, the kollel person. The fight between Yitzchak and Rivka, the two parents, is should he stay that way. They have different plans for the sons. Yitzchak plans with these two children. I'm sort of skipping to next week's segment, but it fits in with what we're doing now. He plans that all blessings of this world should go to whom? Esau. Why? Does he hate Yaakov? Could he be so mean? It doesn't make sense almost. He plans to give all the blessings to Esau, to the bad son, who he has a certain feeling for. And no blessings at all for Yaakov. Because when Esau asked, after Yaakov tricks his father to get the brachot, didn't you save any blessings for me? Father said, no, I gave them all to Yaakov. Then he thinks up something extra for him. So that means he never planned to give Yaakov any blessings. Is he mean? Didn't he appreciate Yaakov at all?
How did he view it?
Huh?
How did he view it?
However he viewed Esau is not important. It's how did he view Yaakov? Well, he must have had something for Yaakov.
He saw it as a greater potential.
Greater, fine, but give him everything. Don't save anything for Yaakov.
He saw potential in it. Greater.
Fine, so give him more. Give him the leadership. But he gave him everything. There wasn't one blessing left for the person who he thought was Yaakov.
So he was the heir to.
But a whole heir, you give a double portion to the better one. You don't give everything. Yeah.
He told Jacob that was originally going to be his blessing, that he would be the father of a great nation.
Yeah, later, he added that on. He said, there's nothing left. I've given it all to Esau. Right? That's an afterthought. So it's answered very nicely and simply. He did appreciate Yaakov. But what's Yaakov's? All the blessings which Isaac gave to Jacob, thinking he was Esau, all of these blessings are material. They're not spiritual. They're the fat of the land, water from heaven. You should have no miscarriages among your animals and your wives and so forth. Okay, they're all very real this world blessings. The view of Yitzchak, who himself was perhaps to some extent the unworldly person, the opposite of an Abraham, was that his son Yaakov should sit in the yeshiva and learn. And who should handle the world? Esau. So all blessings of this world go to Esau. They're all this worldly blessings. Who's the one who has the opposite idea? The little girl from Las Vegas. She's now an older lady, but she, and this is how Reb Soloveitchik put it, she had a different vision than Yitzchak. Yitzchak grew up in a very religious house, the house of Abraham. He was sent to good yeshivas, and he was self-contained in his own world, and perhaps not too much involved with the problems of the world around him. Rivka, who grew up in Las Vegas, knew what happened when you gave all the blessings of this world to the worldly person. When Lavan and Bethuel, when the family she grew up with ruled the place, she knew what kind of society that created. So she had a new vision, that the Yaakov, who was the Ish Tam, the simple, unworldly person, should no longer be that. That he should go out and send him to the school of hard knocks, and the best place to learn to be worldly was to send him where? By her manipulative, power-mad brother Lavan. And Yaakov was there 20 years, and when he came back, it's a different Yaakov. He's not an Ish Tam anymore. He's not simply Yaakov. He's got wives and children and cattle and wealth and servants, and he's a powerful person. He's ready to make war with Esau. He takes three options, like the modern state of Israel: prayer, war, and peace. He tries all three. He's not simple Yaakov anymore. And this was Rivka's vision, that the great religious Jew should not be the type who cuts himself off from the world and is exclusively involved in the Torah, the style of Shimon ben Yochai later, which the Talmud says people should not do on the whole. But on the contrary, should be the style of Torah and Derech Eretz, of the type of religious Jew who's 100% fully immersed in the world and thereby has direct impact on it, has leadership in it, and can help inject the values of the Torah, not just as a theoretical thing or reserved for a small society of people in a cult or group in one little area, but that the entire Jewish world should be permeated by the Torah, and the entire world, even non-Jewish, the entire universe. So this is Rivka's dream. And this is the veil between them. They came from different places. The little Bas Cuba coming from the worst place in the world like Abraham is quite different from the Yitzchak who grew up in a completely religious atmosphere, sheltered in his home and schools. And when it came to raising their children, they had a different vision, and she tricked her husband and defied him because she was so sure her vision was right. The same thing we have here by Sarah and Abraham. Listen to Sarah, she's right. She knows the right, and in this case it was driving away the influence of Yishmael. Each case here, we have the wife having more wisdom than the husband. Of course, you have a concept, too, in Judaism, that a woman only dies for her husband. Yaakov says, Rachel died on me, or I was the one who suffered, even though she left an infant child, Benjamin, and another young child, Yosef. But the real loss is husband and wife and vice versa. That one dies, and somehow that is like the greatest loss a person can have. And there's many expressions in the rabbis of the Talmud which indicate that. Now, when Abraham comes to bury Sarah, he says, as a way of introducing himself to the people of the place, Ger v'toshav anochi. What does that mean? Anybody, translate it to English. A stranger is a ger, anochi mochem. I am a stranger with you. And what's toshav mean? Settler. Which is it? A stranger or a settler? Both. How can you be both? Either I'm here or I'm not here. You know, you buy an apartment in the old city, you have to agree to be a resident. If I'm a tourist, I can't own one there. Huh? Aleph Echad. Yeah.
I think Rashi said that they'll have him as a stranger, and they won't be the separate.
If they have him, he's a stranger, maybe the reverse, yeah? Yeah.
No,
Oh, that he will force himself to settle.
no, he says
I don't know the Rashi. No.
if you'll accept me, then I'll be a stranger and I'll take the land. If you don't accept me, then I'll take the land from you without paying.
Take it without paying. He'll make a war.
Yeah.
Well, Rashi just got thrown out of the Turi Karta. Right? That Rashi you quote would be a very interesting example against, if it's Masei Avos Simon Labanim, if the model behavior of the patriarchs is to be a model for the Jewish people ever after, so that Rashi would imply if the Jews are not given the land of Israel peacefully, they should take it by force.
No, because Rashi's not talking about buying all of it on the final 30 plot.
That's a symbolic plot, though.
Well,
Hebron. Right?
destroy even each other to buy land from each other, not to take over the whole land as well.
But he'll force them. If you can force for one little piece, you can force for 10 little pieces or 100. What's the difference?
Threatening to do it, but he's not necessarily doing it.
Well, he won't. He'll do it. You think it's a blind threat, the Rashi's saying. That's dangerous to say. It's a little heretical.
That's not how you take this company a lot of decision that it's an
Huh?
another in the slot.
Well, but they might hold him up to it. And then how will it look if he backs down?
It's only a veiled threat.
Veiled threat?
It's implicit in his word. He's not saying it outright.
Yeah.
The difference between being a settler and like a ruler, he's not saying he's going to take over, he's saying he's going to live there because he's entitled to the land. And he's a settler, that's not really saying he's going to take it by force. He's saying
Takes it by buying it.
He'll settle there by force. No, but Rashi
But he ends
says,
up buying it.
I assume everybody quoted Rashi. He ends up that way because they give in to him. He'll remain a ger, a stranger, and so forth if they sell it to him. The Malbim has a whole different explanation, which I don't want to go into too much, but it's sort of technical, yeah.
Rashi doesn't say take it by force. He says we'll furnish your own price. He didn't say by force at all.
So what's he telling him? If you won't sell it to me, if you won't deal with me, I'll be a settler.
Incidentally,
Yeah.
Abraham did do something very, very important after his third time.
What?
He gave some first feather for Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara stresses that. I'm just saying that that's a very, very important thing because of what he has done. He has brought a piece of land we can claim it's our land.
As long as you mention that then, so you're asking a question of Reb Soloveitchik's idea, which I simply reported, that, I want to get out of this before I get in trouble. Let Reb Soloveitchik be in trouble, not me. You're asking on Reb Soloveitchik's idea that Avraham did nothing important after Sarah's death to show how great Sarah was. Reb Soloveitchik generally is one with great admiration for women and their qualities, as being really great. That's his approach generally, and this can vary among individuals. And you're saying the great thing he did was to buy this piece of land, which was I'm sorry? The Gemara said which was the beginning of the Jewish settlement, the Jewish possession of the land of Israel. So I'll finish Reb Soloveitchik. To Reb Soloveitchik's theory, what makes this purchase of land the beginning of Abraham's possession, the Jewish people's possession of the land of Israel, is the fact that Sarah is buried there. Huh? I'm sorry? Oh, okay. We'll get to Rashi. We're Reb Soloveitchik now. What makes it great is that Sarah is buried there. And Reb Soloveitchik says the language is like this. Abraham bought the field. It's mentioned after all the negotiations. Maybe in the next session I'll go into the negotiations. The Malbim describes why all these negotiations and the significance of each point. But anyway, it says at one point, Abraham kana, he bought the field. Okay? Finished. Then he buries Sarah. Then when he buries Sarah, we have Vayakam Hasada. The field stood up, or rose up, to be an Achuzah, name of a neighborhood in Haifa. Okay? Achuzah. So it first was a kinyan, a purchase, and then he buries Sarah, and somehow the land is transformed from a purchase into an achuzah. It rose up to be an achuzah. The question is, what is achuzah and what is purchase? According to Reb Soloveitchik, and this was part of last week's talk, that each sacrifice in Abraham's life, the animal sacrifices, the altars, was symbolic of a sacrifice in his life style and his life experience at that point. In other words, when he left everything to come to Israel to follow God, basically, that's his first sacrifice on an altar. Because it represents a sacrifice in his life stage of Lech Lecha me'atzcha me'latzachum beit avicha. Leave your land, your culture, your family, and your father's house. When he was told about Israel, he builds another altar. This is all found in the Sefer Chamesh Drushim. And that other altar means that Israel, the acquisition of Israel, is a sacrifice. As I pointed out last week, not only did God give him a rose garden, what did Abraham get when he came to Israel? After following God and leaving everything, he got a famine and a war. That's what he got. He couldn't find a good job. He got a famine, a common phenomenon of many of us who make aliyah. And he had wars. Two things that happened to Abraham. Here he came, he was coming from a nice place, the height of civilization of the day, that's what he got. It's a long sacrificial process to get Israel. And Reb Soloveitchik says in the course of sacrificing for Israel, one sacrifices oneself for the Holy Land. One is acquiring not just the land of Israel, but a certain inheritable relationship to God. And Elokei Avraham, the God of Abraham, means not just the God to whom Abraham belongs, but God who belongs to Abraham. God lets man acquire, through sacrificial behavior directed toward a high goal, a certain godliness within himself. See, that's another sacrifice. Then I pointed out there's the sacrifice of leaving Yishmael and Eliezer behind. When Abraham goes to sacrifice Isaac, the Akedah, he leaves behind the two boys. He takes them with him, and he leaves them behind. He takes the two boys who represent the not-so-religious Jew, Eliezer, and the non-Jew, Ishmael. And yet, when he comes to the mountain to make the sacrifice, he tells them, you remain behind with the donkey, and I and the lad will go ad ko. The idea of this, Reb Soloveitchik said, if you don't want them, don't take them. If you take them away, take them all the way if you need their help. But this represents a sacrifice. That Abraham's way is not to cut himself off from the world. It's not the way of those small segments of the Orthodox community which believe in separating themselves completely from the rest of Jewish people and the rest of mankind. Nor is it the way of universal man, who says, I'm the same as all of mankind, that I will walk with them all the way. Abraham's way is to be part of his society. He wants to, even on the way to Mount Moriah, the redemption today, the Geula, right now, the beginning of the Messianic age, as Rev Kook so beautifully describes it, needed a political state of Israel. The Independence Day of the State of Israel is not just a national holiday, it's a great spiritual holiday of the beginning of the redemption of the Jewish people. All the yeshivas, the Baal Teshuvas, everything probably would not be here if there were no political state of Israel. And those Baal Teshuva yeshivas, which exist because of it, should be the ones to most celebrate it, as Hakara told. So, Abraham doesn't cut himself off from the other Jews, and in going to Mount Moriah and going toward the eventual state where all men will be under God, Abraham knows he needs the help of Eliezer and Yishmael. He needs the world's help. He may need a UN. He may need the United States for arms and money. He can't help it. That's how God in his wisdom has made this world. That he doesn't want Abraham to be completely independent of them. Abraham has to be working with them on the way. And he has to work with the non-religious Jew. The religious Jews could not themselves build the state of Israel. The people, observant Jews, because religious is a much deeper term. Many who are non-observant may be religious, as Reb Soloveitchik always says, and many people who are observant may not be religious. They may not really feel God and sense God, but going through it mechanically. So Abraham needs them, yet at certain moments, Abraham is involved in transcendental realms, realms of contact with God, like the Akedah itself, that which is beyond all reason, beyond all logic, and beyond all human affairs, that which is a crazy adventure with God. At those moments, he has to part from them and say, you wait with this world, Hamor, donkey, which symbolizes the material world. You wait with this world, and I and the lad will go to Ko, which represents the transcendental world in Jewish tradition. So, and we will come back to you. And then, but it's not forever. The Jews don't want to be a separate people and the rest of the world behind. We're just show the way. We're priests. We're holy people. Take us a couple generations to do it here in Israel. But the whole world is to come to our way. We will come back to you. And it says they went yachad. After the Akedah, Eliezer and Yishmael and Avraham and Yitzchak all went together. So that is also, according to Reb Soloveitchik, the real meaning of the sacrifice of the sheep after the Akedah. That the sacrifice that he is making is the hard role of being at one with the world and at the same time apart from the world. And what expression in this segment we just had for that a few minutes ago? That he's one with the world and apart? Ger v'tosha. This is Reb Soloveitchik's interpretation. That I am both a stranger and a resident. I share all duties, I share all responsibilities to develop my society. I'm one of you. And yet there's sometimes I'm going to have to be a stranger. And this is the message regarding burial, because where does it really come to effect? I'll be with you now, I just want to answer his point. It comes into effect by the burial of Sarah. Once you get into burial, to life beyond death, and we believe in resurrection of the body, not just the soul. The Rambam has it as a encore for all the players for 1,000 years or so. Others have it eternally. But however you phrase it, we believe in resurrection. So when he gets into these kind of realms, Abraham is no longer a Toshah. He doesn't share the normal secular worldview of the Chomer. Abraham is in a different world. And at this point, he must part from them. They say, the best of our graves you may bury. No. I don't want to be, because we have a different conception of death. My conception of death is altogether different, and my dead must be buried in a separate place. Because death to us is a whole different experience. It would not be appropriate on our own. Now, when he buries Sarah, the burial of Sarah symbolizes this difference and also symbolizes sacrifice. But this is in a way, especially if you take those medrashim that she died as a result of hearing of the Chaye Sara, this is the greatest sacrifice or the greatest hardship or test in Abraham's life, the death of Sarah. With the death of Sarah through such sacrifice, and Sarah's whole life, again, Chaye Sara, that Sarah's life is embodied in her death. Sarah's whole sacrificial life. This transforms the purchase of Abraham from a normal purchase, which would not have so much significance, into something which is transcendental, which is completely beyond worldly experience. And to be more specific, if I buy today a house, how long, in a meaningful sense, will I have that house? Anybody. Say I buy a house now. How long will I have it? Till I die. Can I have it after my death, in a sense? My children. How long can that go on? Longer. In England, how long is a house in the family?
400 or 500 years.
400 or 500 years. That's about it in human experience. In any society. I mean, there's a limit to how stable. What will happen? Somebody will sell it. One of the heirs will sell it. The simplest thing. A war will come. The society will disintegrate. The neighborhood will change. They'll build housing projects there. It's almost inconceivable that I can really say I own anything that's really part of me and attached to me. I don't grab it. I'm kona it. I have legal title. But achuzah, a grabbing, is really not true. Because it's not really mine. I know it's going to go away from anything that means me within, at the most, a number of hundreds of years. Abraham's possession is beyond all normal secular categories. 4,000 years later, his descendants have this land. As you pointed out, that grave, Hebron, is his first actual possession of the land. But it's not a normal human possession. If he just bought it, they also bought. The Canaanite nations bought, the Crusaders bought, Arab peoples bought, the Turks bought, and they bought it and they held it for a while and that's it. Goodbye, Charlie. But today, Abraham bought it in a way that transcends all human categories and which is eternal. As God said, I'll give you this land, Kamesh Ma'amar's, and so forth and so on. He bought it that 4,000 years later, his descendants, we have a share in this land. Why? Because it wasn't just bought with money. It was bought with the ultimate sacrifice, in this case, of Sarah's life. So according to Reb Soloveitchik's interpretation of that, this great act was not so much Abraham's act of purchase, which itself would not have ensured such perpetuity and holiness, but Sarah's burial in that place. It's called a kinyan when Abraham buys it, but it's called a chuzah, an eternal holding when Sarah is buried it. That would answer your question. Okay, now, you had a point.
Yeah, on one interpretation of what Muhammad Soloveitchik said together with the Shabbos. Is also worthy. But he's the best of Islam, maybe occurred.
Yeah, I was asked that question last night too. The Jew Amlabad, O Yishkon, and so forth. There's many statements of Jews. Well, fine, that's the ger part. That's all. But when he says you will be the father of many nations and all the countries will be blessed in you and so forth. No. Well, first of all, they won't care about us. And they won't be considered. That's again the point. We are not the same as other nations, but not that we wish to be apart from them. There are moments when we're apart. That's the ger side. He's looking at it as one of the other nations, as Bilam himself is one of the most sensual and materially oriented people that exist. So that's his approach to it. Okay. Now, just to finish Ger V'Toshav, and I'll go on to other points in the next class. We'll stop in about 4 minutes. Ger V'Toshav has another dimension, according to the Malbim. The Malbim mentions Ger V'Toshav is something else. Where else am I sort of a settler and sort of a stranger, besides the Jew among the Gentiles? Besides the simple fact that Avram could be telling the Bnei Chet that I am now a ger, but I'm coming to be a settler. I'm going to live in Hebron. That's also a possibility, very simply. That he's telling them legally, you weren't allowed to sell land to strangers. I'm a stranger now, but I'm going to become a settler. That would be the simple pshat of it, by the way, even more than Rashi. If I recall, the Malbim brings that. But there's another dimension in which one is a stranger and a settler. Where else is one a stranger and a settler? All right, go on. Olam Hazeh. In this world, it's like a hall to the next world. The famous story of Chavetz Chaim, that a nice balabas came from America, a well-to-do man, and he sees the Chavetz Chaim living in this room with a couple sticks of furniture, a really decrepit place, clean I'm sure, but decrepit. And he said, how can you live like this? The Chavetz Chaim, like a good Jew, answered the question with a question. I don't understand. Where's your furniture? Where's your sofa? Where's everything? Where's your TV set? Whatever it was. He says, what do you mean, where's my stuff? I'm only here on a trip. I just brought my clothes and all. Chavetz Chaim said, I'm also here on the trip. That I'm only passing through this world into the next world. I don't think this is a general Jewish approach, by the way, and I don't recommend this to anyone. We've discussed it elsewhere. Not most Gedolim did not live like the Chavetz Chaim. But it's an approach which certainly has a certain meaning or validity to it. That this world is just temporary. The main thing is eternity. We're here 70 years, 80 years, 100 years, 120. So why bother with getting dragged down with a lot of baggage when we're traveling? Okay? So Ger v'Toshav, the real dispute according to the Malbim of Avraham and the Bnei Chet was the whole issue of death and burial. What does death mean? To them, death meant, that's it, that's the end. I'm an animal, like every animal I die, finished. All right, we have a certain human sensitivity. We can't leave a corpse lying around. It's offensive, it's unpleasant, and it's lacking a little bit in dignity, so we give it a send-off, we bury it. But Mifchak Vorenu, it doesn't matter where you're buried. We have a big public cemetery. It's all the same end, so just bury any place. Avram was teaching them, no, Ger v'Toshav Anochi Machem. That in this world, this is the Malbim, my role, I am a settler. I'm not, again, a Reb Shimon ben Yochai. I'm not one who tries to leave this world and not be occupied. I'm fully occupied with this world, but at the same time, I know I'm a stranger in this world. And every day we live this paradox, especially in the land of Israel, which is Kimei Hashemayim al Haaretz, that which combines this world and the next. The actual daily life here. It's not an out-of-this-world existence, and it's not a completely in-this-world existence. So Ger v'Toshav, he's telling them, I am here only temporarily. And my conception of death is quite different from your conception of death. True, the body goes back to the dust, but it's coming back again. The same way every day God's making us from dust of the earth when I eat an apple. Coming out of the ground is turning into Yaakov Fogelman. So every day God makes us from the dust of the earth, and it's going to happen again at a future day, on a grand scale. And the soul goes back to God to wait there meanwhile, so the body comes back. When he started explaining all these concepts, this is something new to them. And that's what he means, Ger v'Toshav, and I have to have my separate burial because I have to sleep with my fathers. We're all going to get together again. Each case someone great dies, and he slept with his fathers. The family must be together. And it has to be here in Hebron. Hebron, that which joins heaven and earth. The Chaber is to join. And that's where the couples who are really joined in the great mission lie. The four couples, Kiryat Arba, the four couples, and so forth. And according to the Malbim, he began to explain and teach to them all of these concepts. And that's enough for this point. We'll have a break. We'll have another 3/4 of an hour, about 9:15.
What's the Yehuda? Yehuda is only references to Yehuda is only referring to Hebron. How do you extend the concept to talk about Eretz?
By the sacrifices that everyone, including the modern Zionist movement, would make later. The same kind of sacrifices, which can only be explained in terms of the Torah.
Why the time of did he not go ahead and lie the resurrection?
Huh? Because he wasn't ready. Their sin wasn't completed yet. God told them, 4th generation. And they'll come back with sacrifice of war. And that might be why you have to make it work.
I have a right.
Oh, hi, how are you? You here visiting, or?
Yeah, I got here twice a week.
Very nice. All the Bostonians come together. Oh, Rabbi Small?
Brother.
Brother.
Brother, that's